Hey there, Melting Man 234 here. You're about to watch a re-edited version of the very first episode of Forgotten Media, where I talked about an obscure cartoon show called Sheep in the Big City. The original was taken down suddenly over copyright reasons, and because of that, I've had to remove a lot of images and audio from this thing to try and make it more YouTube friendly, I guess. Oh well, at least this does give me an opportunity to talk about some new content that I didn't know of back then when I was working on it years ago. Now, if you're wondering why my voice sounds a bit different in this video, where I sound more slow and a bit slurry, that was because I was still recovering from jaw surgery at the time, so that's pretty much why I sounded very odd in those first 3 episodes of Forgotten Media. Anyway, here it is, the re-edited version of the first episode of Forgotten Media, with some bonus content at the end.
Hey everyone, Melting Man 234 here, and welcome to the first episode of Forgotten Media. This is a new series where I talk about movies, shows, characters, products, anything that nobody remembers anymore. Today's episode, I'll be talking about a forgotten Cartoon Network show called Sheep in the Big City, an interesting and funny cartoon show created by Mo Willems in November 4th of 2000. The show is about a sheep living in the big city while constantly being chased by a secret military organization. It starts off on a farm owned by a man named Farmer John, a man who loves farming so much his first name is Farmer. Anyway, they later introduce the main character, a sheep named Sheep. No surprise. Meanwhile, inside a top secret military base, General Specific and his assistant Private Public are planning to capture Sheep to use in their sheep-powered ray gun. Sheep soon finds out about their plan and decides to leave the farm to keep his friends safe and head out to the big city to find a better life. While he's there, he enjoys living in the city away from his boring life at the farm and manages to escape General Specific's plans on capturing him. As the series progressed, it had a lot of interesting characters. For the main cast, we have Sheep, who's your average sheep who enjoys bleating and eating and all that stuff. General Specific, a man who is small but very diabolical and very dim-witted at that. He's more like those comedic villains you see on those old cartoon shows, kind of. Then there's Private Public, who is General Specific's loyal assistant. Next we have the Angry Scientist, who comes up with crazy gadgets that help the General try to capture Sheep. And he's pretty much considered to be a running gag, as everyone calls him the Mad Scientist, and he gets irritated and tries to remind them that his name is Angry Scientist. Then there's Farmer John, who's the most boring character on the show, since he just goes on and on about random stuff and nobody bothers listening to him. We have Ben Plotz, who is the narrator of the show and sometimes interacts with the characters, simulating the breaking the fourth wall gag. Swanky, who is a poodle, who is Sheep's love interest. Lady Richington, who is the owner of Swanky and has a flaming hatred for Sheep and constantly beats him up with her stainless steel wig. And little Lisa Rento, who's this mean, bratty little girl who enjoys torturing Sheep, like jumping on him, riding him, using him as a bat, you name it. We also have an interesting cast of minor characters like the Oxymoron spokesperson, who is this annoying salesman who tries to advertise his stuff from Oxymoron, the plot device, who is literally a plot device, and helps General Specific with plans on how to move the story forward, a talking ham sandwich who speaks in a more upper-class scientific kind of accent, and on one episode he becomes mayor of the big city. Then there's the Sombrero Brothers, who are two characters who try to be funny, but fail miserably at that. Jimmy McGame who's a weird game show host that appears in weird games like Name That Name, I'll Answer the Questions Here, and others. And then there's Jay, who is this guy that appears when anybody reads or sees a sign. He'll say it out loud. The show would start off with a random advertising, then the screen would go fuzzy and the title theme would begin. Each episode is split into 3 chapters. The name of the chapters have very bad sheep puns. There was one time when Ben was very frustrated and decided to name the 3rd chapter some pun on the word sheep. Once the chapter is done, it shows a fake commercial or a skit before going into the commercial break. One of the skits involved General Specific and Private Public trying to make a rap song, but fail at trying to rhyme. Some of them are very random, like the zillion billion dollar question. Kids say the most hysterical things. And the most disturbing one, touched by a ninja. Once all 3 chapters are done, they end the show with a ranting Swede, a man from Sweden who always finds ways to rant, like He rants about meatballs or piano keys, answering machines, anything that pops into his head. This guy was full of energy and rage. You just couldn't help laugh at his funny performance. When the ranting Swede came on, you didn't know what to expect. The show was well known for breaking the fourth wall and using literal humor. One example is that when anyone uses the exclamation, "Great Scott," the Scotsman would pop out of nowhere and say, "Yes?" The show ran for 2 seasons, 27 episodes total, and every episode had its own unique storyline. Like, one episode involved General Specific trying to capture sheep, but gets distracted by a spinning plate performance. One episode involved General Specific finally capturing sheep, but the angry scientist doesn't put him in the sheep-powered ray gun because he didn't have it ready, because he thought they would never capture sheep due to it being so contrary to the setup of the show. One episode involved Ben coming out and saying the cast is sick, so they show a silent film full of ancestors from certain characters from the show. Jay's the only man in the audience and reads all the title cards. One episode involved General Specific becoming a superhero, and another one when the General teams up with his character called Dr. Oh No 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 No, and he helps them capture sheep. Once they capture sheep, he decides to double-cross them and take over the secret military base. And to top it off, he plans to use an elephant in the sheep-powered ray gun, which means it'll give the machine enough power to destroy the world! Out of all the episodes that are in Sheep in the Big City, the weirdest one will have to be the last episode in Season 1. Now that the show has been explained, I'm sure you're wondering how it ended up being forgotten. Well, despite the positive feedback it got from critics and reviewers, the only downside is the show lacked a good amount of viewership. It's no surprise that only a rare group of people actually remember this show. And with that, Sheep in the Big City was cancelled on April 7th of 2002 and was never seen again. Nowadays, it's hard to find an episode of Sheep in the Big City. It never got a home video release, although the pilot episode managed to be featured as a bonus in a Powerpuff Girls DVD. At one point, all the episodes from Season 1, excluding the pilot, were available on iTunes before it was removed for unknown reasons. As for the internet, the only place where I could find all of the episodes is vbox7.com. Despite the website being in a different language, all the episodes are in English.
It's time for an update, because there's quite a bit of Sheep in the Big City content that I forgot to mention or didn't know of at the time. One such topic involves a cancelled episode that would have involved General Specific dealing with a relative who was always better than him, and a running joke where a private public is attacked by a crazy old lady. I found this from a blog that Mo Willems wrote, but I can't seem to find it anymore. The show had very little merchandising, mostly a single comic issue as part of Cartoon's comic series, and some toys that were sold at Subway. Man, I remember I used to have all of those. If I'd have known better, I should have kept them all rather than getting rid of them, because nowadays those toys are very rare and not easy to find on eBay or Amazon. The character Sheep has made a few cameos and references in other shows, mostly in Codename Kids Next Door, seeing as how Mo Willems was also involved with that series. There are some episodes where they feature some plush toys that resemble the character, but the most noticeable cameo would be in the episode Operation Graduates, where it features a scene where the delightful children from down the lane are turned into a flock of sheep, and one of them resembles the main character from Sheep in the Big City. Aside from that, Sheep was present during Cartoon Network's 20th anniversary, and he makes a very brief cameo in the OKKO episode Crossover Nexus. As I had mentioned before, Season 1 of the show was available on iTunes for a while until it was suddenly taken down, but there actually does exist a DVD that contains episodes of the show. Yeah, an actual DVD release. In Europe. And for how long I've been doing Forgotten Media, I've been starting to notice a trend. Obscure films and TV shows that get released onto DVD, but only in Europe and not in America. Like, seriously, what's the big deal with this regional exclusivity thing? Japan gets all the good stuff, and apparently Europe gets all the good obscure stuff. Now that I think about it, who even owns the rights to the show anyway? Mo Willems, Cartoon Network, Curious Pictures, Warner Brothers Television Distribution? Because it still saddens me that the series still hasn't gotten a complete series DVD or Blu-ray set, let alone not part of any official streaming service. I mean, come on, make a complete Season 1 and 2 DVD or Blu-ray release already. Put the show on Netflix or Hulu or something. The big cities need their sheep, damn it! I mean, sure, it's not the most super ultra special greatest show of all time, But I would appreciate it if there was some kind of official home media or streaming release of the show, and in America, rather than having to paw around on the internet to find episodes to watch. Anyway, that's all the new content I have to offer, so I'll just let my past self wrap things up.
In closing, Sheep in the Big City was a very funny and very witty show that will probably never see that kind of humor again in other shows. Well, that wraps up this episode of Forgotten Media, so this is Melting Man 234 signing off.